The first sound of it was not a sound at all. It arrived as a pressure behind my eyes, a tightening of space itself, as though the stars had drawn a slow breath and forgotten how to release it. In the archives of the High Cartography Ring, silence is usually sacred. It is where civilizations go to die gently, reduced to starlight and footnotes. But this silence was different. It hummed, it pressed, it listened. I was the youngest archivist in the spire, my sensory crests still pale with youth, my record ink untested by war or wonder. I believed the universe to be mapped, categorized, and ultimately knowable. Then the signal came from the forbidden quadrant, and my faith in order shattered like glass under gravity. The pulse was singular, no repetition, no pattern that fit our mathematics. It pierced our arrays like a needle of frozen light. Ancient, impossibly ancient, yet unmistakably intentional. Our instruments screamed before falling still, as if the signal had reached through the void and placed a finger across their mouths. In the council chamber, the stars glowed through transparent walls. Admirals shifted like blades in scabbards. Priests wrapped their limbs around themselves, murmuring that the quadrant was sealed for a reason. My role was merely to observe, to record, to make language out of dread. But dread had no grammar. On the central holosphere, Earth materialized, a small, stubborn blue marble wrapped in storm. Lightning spidered across its night side like veins of white fire. Its magnetic field blazed crimson on our displays, howling with energies that would have torn lesser worlds apart. Our databases labeled it Class 12 Deathworld, unsurvivable, a planet that should have been sterile, barren, or extinct, yet the signal came from there. Admiral Threx broke the silence. His voice was steel, sharpened by centuries of conquest. "Containment," he ordered. "Quarantine the quadrant. Prepare extraction drones." The priests wailed softly, claiming the planet's gravity drank souls. I recorded their words, though they tasted like fear dressed as faith. In my chest, something coiled tighter. The signal did not feel like a cry for help. It felt like a gaze. From the observation deck, I watched our fleet stir. Glass-hulled ships unfolded like frightened birds taking flight from a burning tree. Their drives shimmered, scattering starlight into pale halos. I had seen armadas move before, against pirates, rebels, even rival empires, but never like this, never with such hesitation. We sent scouts first, as is protocol. Slender drones brushed in reflective alloys slipped towards the planet's atmosphere. I tracked them breath by breath. They did not break through. The first wave burned to nothing in the upper sky, vaporized in curtains of aurora that rippled green and violet like wounded steel. Our screens filled with static shaped like pain. The second wave made it farther, skimming the thermosphere, and then simply vanished.
No debris, no explosion, no signal, as if the planet had swallowed them whole. The council murmured. The admirals frowned. I felt cold. The third wave was different. We armored them with hardened shells, shielded them with algorithms older than some empires, and whispered prayers through their circuits. They pierced the atmosphere like nails driven into flesh. For a moment, there was nothing. Then they returned. But they were not ours anymore. Their broadcast flooded the chamber without warning. Not data, not code, but sound. Human sound. A chaotic tapestry of music, laughter, engines roaring, children crying, and distant thunder of weapons firing. It poured through our senses in impossible harmony, as though joy and violence were threads of the same cloth. My sensory crests burned. I fell to my knees. Around me, seasoned admirals clutched their heads. Priests screamed. The drones hovered above Earth like obedient eyes, repeating the transmission again and again. 1,000 human voices woven into one unstoppable chorus. Through it all, I felt the planet watching us. Our instruments recalibrated. The readings changed. The atmosphere was no longer merely hostile, it was responsive. Storms bent around the drones with surgical precision. Lightning arced closer, not to destroy, but to study. Clouds rolled like living membranes. That was when the twist first revealed itself. We had assumed we were probing Earth. We were wrong. Earth was probing us. I rose, trembling, and forced my gaze back to the holosphere. Beneath the clouds, heat signatures bloomed across continents. Cities, sprawling, luminous, tangled, flared into life as if awakened from sleep. Satellites blinked in coordinated rhythm, stitching invisible webs around the planet. Tiny lights moved on the surface, vehicles, aircraft, vessels, too many to count, and all of them angled upward, toward us. In that moment, a single thought crystallized with terrifying clarity. We were not discovering Earth. Earth was noticing us. The Council tried to regain control. Admiral Threx barked orders: jam the signal, retrieve the drones, prepare. His words fractured into static. On every screen, human symbols appeared. Simple shapes, looping lines, indecipherable, yet deliberate. They filled our displays like a tide. Then came images: oceans at dawn, cities glowing at night, soldiers kneeling beside wounded enemies, a lone figure standing atop a mountain while a storm split the sky behind him. Not threats, not boasts, declarations. Deep beneath the clouds, seismic readings spiked. The planet shuddered, not in fear, but in readiness. Its tectonic plates shifted like shoulders rolling before a clash. Our gravity sensors faltered as Earth's magnetic heart pulsed louder, faster, like a drum calling warriors to battle. A senior priest collapsed beside me, whispering that the world was alive. I did not correct him.
In the chamber, silence returned, but now it was heavier, charged with something ancient and awake. The third wave drones drifted closer to orbit, no longer machines, but emissaries. They hovered above a massive ocean, broadcasting a final fragment of sound, a single human voice. Calm, firm, unafraid. The words did not need translation. They struck us like gravity. A glitch in cosmic order, a planet that should have been stamped out by its own brutality. I recorded their decree in trembling script. But in my private log, I wrote something else. A premonition. As I looked down at the blue world spinning beneath our fleet, I felt something stir in my bones, a primordial dread older than our species. Humanity was not merely surviving their death world. They were shaping it, training it, wearing its storms like armor. And now, their eyes were on us. Outside the spire, our armada hung in uneasy orbit. Engines flickered. Shields wavered. The stars reflected in their hulls like broken glass. Below, Earth rolled on, serene, radiant, terrifying, as if nothing in the galaxy could break its stride. Then the clouds parted, and something vast moved beneath them. Not a ship, not a weapon. Something that made our instruments die instantly. My final entry of the hour trembled across the record stone. We came to watch a planet. We have awakened a predator. Dawn did not break over Earth. It bled. From low orbit, the horizon peeled open in a slow wound of gold and crimson, light leaking across oceans that shimmered like molten metal. I pressed my palms against the observation crystal of the flagship, feeling, rather than seeing, the tremor that ran through our entire armada. Thousands of glass-hulled vessels hung in the planet's gravity well like shards of a shattered mirror, each reflecting a world that felt far too aware of us. We had conquered 100 systems. We had flattened moons and caged stars. Yet this single blue sphere made our engines hesitate. Our fleet stretched across the night side of the planet in a loose crescent formation. In the darkness below, lightning crawled across continents in silent, impossible webs. It illuminated scars that looked like ancient battlefields, mountain ranges folded like crushed armor, deserts blistered by forgotten cataclysms, and coastlines chewed ragged by a restless sea. To our scanners, Earth was chaotic but weak. Humanity appeared fractured. Nations, factions, ideologies, borders drawn in blood and ink. Their technology flickered unevenly across the globe, primitive in some regions, advanced in others, inconsistent and divided. I did not share their confidence. As our ships drifted closer to the magnetic poles, alarms rippled through the fleet. Drives sputtered, navigation arrays twisted like suffering creatures, compasses spun madly, and targeting systems warped into nonsense. The planet was not simply interfering with us, it was arguing with our machines. On the bridge, Admiral Threx gripped the rail, knuckles pale against the crystal. "Stabilize," he barked. "Compensate." Yet beneath his command, I heard a quiver. I stood alone at the aft viewport and watched the night side of Earth breathe. Storm systems rolled like living lungs, lightning flashing in rhythm with something I could almost feel in my bones. Each strike illuminated the surface in brief, violent clarity, glaciers grinding against continents, forests trembling under hurricane winds, cities blazing like constellations fallen to ground. In those flashes, I sensed history layered upon history, ice ages that crushed life to powder, asteroid fire that boiled oceans, plagues that scourged civilizations, and still, somehow, a species that endured. The first landers deployed at dawn. Slender craft slipped from our ships like drops of silver rain, scattering toward multiple biomes in calculated arcs. Our strategy was textbook: test the atmosphere, probe the terrain, establish footholds. I watched the desert lander descend into a region that glowed white-hot even at sunrise. Our sensors fried within seconds. Sandstorms swallowed the craft whole, vortexes spinning with impossible precision, as though guided by intent rather than wind. When telemetry returned, it was nothing but static, shaped like screaming. In a vast forest, another lander vanished beneath a canopy so dense it drank light. Drones sent to retrieve it never returned. Our thermal scans showed movement, not animals, but entire ecosystems shifting around our intrusion, roots coiling like tendrils, shadows thickening into walls. Above an ocean, a third lander skimmed low, only to be swallowed by a wave that rose higher than any natural measure should allow. It was as if the sea itself had reached up and taken it. Yet the cities unsettled me most. They glittered across the dark side like metallic bones wrapped in veins of light. Skyscrapers stabbed the sky. Highways gleamed like circuits. Satellites glinted in orbit. Human machines that had been watching us long before we watched them. We expected panic. We expected chaos. We expected missiles or prayers. Instead, we saw eyes. Tiny figures gathered on rooftops, highways, beaches, and mountain ridges. Millions of them, unmoving, simply staring upward. No fleeing crowds, no shrines, no hysterics. They stood shoulder to shoulder, silent as stone, their faces tilted toward our armada. Through magnification lenses, I studied them. Some held small devices that glowed in their hands. Others pointed. A few waved, not in greeting, but in inspection, as though cataloging us. There was no fear in their posture, no reverence, only assessment. In the council channel, commanders spoke loudly of domination. "They are divided," one general sneered. "Their governments bicker while we hang over their world." Another laughed, tracing invasion routes across holographic maps. "Their weapons are crude. Their unity is a myth."
I recorded their bravado, but in my private log, I wrote something very different. We are hovering above a grave that is still breathing. Our fleet descended further into low orbit, circling like vultures. Engines glowed pale blue against the planet's curve. From this height, Earth looked beautiful. Too beautiful. Oceans swirling with turquoise, clouds streaked like brushstrokes, sunlight dancing across ice caps. Yet beneath that beauty lurked menace. Our gravity sensors hiccuped near tectonic fault lines, as if the ground itself were shifting to track our movement. Magnetic storms rippled along the poles, curling around our ships with delicate, predatory grace. Then came the twist. A human aircraft lifted from a coastal city, sleek, silent, impossibly fast. It did not approach us with weapons drawn. Instead, it climbed slowly, directly beneath our formation, flying in a perfect spiral as if studying our patterns. Our defense grids locked onto it automatically. Sirens blared across the bridge. "Shoot it down," a captain hissed. Admiral Threx hesitated. Below, more aircraft joined the first, dozens, then hundreds, weaving intricate formations that mirrored our own. They were not aggressive. They were precise, almost elegant, tracing invisible lines through the sky like artists mapping the air. Simultaneously, our comms crackled to life, not with threats, but with images. Floods, fires, earthquakes, wars, famines, humans crawling through rubble to save strangers, soldiers laying down weapons to carry the wounded, scientists standing before erupting volcanoes, instruments in hand, children laughing beside tanks.
survivors rebuilding cities brick by brick. The message was unmistakable. We endure. Our scanners suddenly spiked. Across the globe, power grids surged in synchronized rhythm. Satellites shifted positions in coordinated dance. Radar pulses washed over us, not to attack, but to map. In the depths of the ocean, something stirred. Our sonar readings, designed for space, not water, screamed before collapsing. A vast shape moved beneath the waves, larger than any known creature, gliding with unhurried certainty. Earth was not resisting us with brute force. It was revealing itself layer by layer, as though peeling back a curtain. On the bridge, silence fell like a blade. Even the general stopped talking. I returned my gaze to the surface. The humans still stood watching, millions of them, calm, patient, unbroken by the shadow of our armada. Some lifted their devices again, capturing us in tiny frames of light. Others simply folded their arms. They did not look like prey. They looked like a species that had survived too much to be impressed. A tremor rippled through the planet, not violent, deliberate. Mountains shifted imperceptibly. Storms rearranged themselves with surgical precision. The magnetic field pulsed, brushing against our shields like a testing hand. In that moment, the illusion shattered.
Earth was not a wounded world waiting to be conquered. It was a seasoned predator, scarred, patient, and perfectly capable of remembering how to hunt. The fleet tightened formation instinctively, as if sensing a larger presence closing around us. Far below, a storm over the Pacific split open in a perfectly circular ring, revealing a dark void at its center that swallowed all light. Our instruments died across the bridge. And from beneath the clouds, something answered, not with sound, but with movement so vast it bent the ocean itself. The cliff of water rose. The sky held its breath, and Earth looked directly at us. We were not alone. The galactic hunters arrived like polished blades, moving through the void with quiet inevitability. Their ships were sleek and black, cutting the starlight into ribbons of shadow. Every civilized species feared them, and with reason. They collected trophies from the deadliest worlds, leaving nothing but empty husks in their wake. Earth, we soon realized, had drawn their gaze. I accompanied them as an observer, a chronicler of conquest. I expected arrogance, I expected triumph. Instead, I found awe and terror. They descended into a northern wilderness where the white trees leaned over frozen rivers, the frost thick enough to crack steel. Our instruments screamed before we even touched the ground. Predators here exceeded every lethality threshold known to the galaxy. Gigantic forms with jaws that could crush bone, endurance beyond calculation, senses sharper than any human-engineered device. The hunters tracked one such creature, moving like shadows over ice and snow. I expected a swift kill, a textbook display of dominance. But when they found it, there was already a human there, alone, unarmed, still. At first, we assumed the human was dead. Then it moved. Not in panic, not in desperation. Deliberately, with ease. The predator circled, snapping its massive jaws. The human danced just beyond its reach, tapping its snout, step-siding with fluid grace. Breath puffed into the frozen air in rhythmic clouds. The hunters recoiled, not physically, but in every sensor, every instinct. It looked like madness to us. To the predator, it was challenge, invitation, respect. Moments later, more humans emerged, calm, unarmed, their voices low, carrying across the ice like distant wind, yet commanding enough to still the predator. The first human placed a hand on the scarred head of the beast. It froze, then bowed. The hunters retreated, silently, elegantly, not in shame, but in recognition. They had sought danger, carnage, and thrill. They had found control, a mastery over life and death that surpassed even the hunter's most lethal innovations. I watched as our own ships began to lift, engines trembling. Earth had not merely bred killers, it had bred beings who could tame them. In that instant, I realized the truth. We had come to hunt a planet, and discovered a species that toyed with the very concept of death.
Above the wilderness, the hunters' black ships vanished into the sky, leaving only the shimmer of ice and the quiet exhalation of a world that had just claimed another victory. Unseen, unchallenged, unbroken. The hunters' departure left a silence heavier than any I had known. Our arrogance, once a warm cloak around the council, now shivered in its own threadbare fibers. They had come to plunder and had fled, yet we pressed on. Divide and conquer, the council insisted. They are fractured, their governments bicker. I watched them speak,
noting the trembling of their appendages and the sweat of uncertainty on their foreheads. They were wrong. It began quietly. At first, nothing seemed amiss. Our satellites blinked to life as usual, and fleets prepared for orbital deployment. Then, one by one, the sky itself awoke. Satellites not of our making lit with precision, forming invisible webs that pulsed across the atmosphere. Communication streams fractured into static, shapes that our machines could not parse, words our translators failed to catch. The first strike came without flash, without roar. Entire squadrons of assault crafts stalled in orbit. Engines died mid-thrust. Weapons locked and refused orders. Systems we had trusted for decades fell into the hands of forces we could not see. The humiliation was quiet, precise, perfect. From the observation deck, I saw human cities bloom like strange, deliberate constellations. Railguns emerged from mountainsides, their barrels glinting under the sun. Drone swarms rose like metallic storms, black and silver against the sky, yet never striking indiscriminately. They moved with choreography, restraint guiding every action. The humans were not attacking, they were teaching. Reports from ground teams reached me through fragmented channels. Soldiers moved as if the planet itself guided them, swift, precise, unhesitating. Engineers repaired war machines while under fire, laughing softly as sparks rained around them. Medics carried wounded humans and aliens alike, refusing to discriminate between species or allegiance. They fought not to dominate, but to protect. In the council chamber, strategy collapsed into panic. Every plan we devised, every tactic we attempted was anticipated before we could execute. Maneuvers mirrored ours, systems commandeered before they could deploy. Every countermeasure became redundant almost instantly. I felt something I had never felt in my long life of observation: vulnerability, smallness, inadequacy. We were no longer masters of the sky. We were intruders, hovering above a world that did not belong to us. And yet the sky itself seemed patient, deliberate, almost sentient. Lightning traced invisible circuits in the clouds. Satellite pulses danced like subtle laughter. The atmosphere shimmered in patterns too complex to be random. For the first time, I understood that Earth did not need weapons to win. It only needed to exist, to remember, to act.
Its response was not wrath, it was inevitability. As dusk fell across mountain and ocean, I traced the horizon with trembling eyes. Humans moved in silence and purpose, guided by instinct, history, and a will older than any empire I had ever chronicled. We had come to subdue a species. The planet had shown us we were not the hunters. We were the prey. And somewhere beneath the cloud-streaked sky, I felt the heartbeat of a world that refused to surrender. The red hour arrived like a wound across the planet. Sunset bled across continents, spilling gold and crimson into the oceans, painting forests and deserts in molten fire. From orbit, I could see the full scale of it. Earth transformed from a stubborn jewel into a battlefield of impossible clarity. The Council had decided in their hubris to unleash everything: planet-cracking weapons, relativistic munitions, fleets that blackened the stars themselves. Overwhelmed them, the generals said. We believed it. We had to. And then the world responded. Gravity itself seemed to resist us. Fleets that had flown unmoved for decades faltered. Navigation grids quivered. Engines groaned against invisible pressures, as though the planet was pulling back against our intrusion. Human defenses awakened with terrifying precision. Rail slugs tore through formations like surgeons' knives. Swarms of drones moved through the void, dismantling capital ships piece by piece. Reactors, weapons arrays, shield emitters, each struck not randomly, but with unerring purpose. It was surgical, beautiful, horrifying. I descended with a council delegation, ostensibly to negotiate surrender. Instead, I found battlefields that defied comprehension. Humans stood shoulder to shoulder with species we had enslaved, former captives and prisoners now fighting beside them. Mortally wounded soldiers refused evacuation so that others could survive. Engineers repaired shattered batteries while bombardment rained down around them. Pilots we had assumed lost flew broken crafts into planetary weapons, smiling through fractured visors, their eyes clear and unafraid. It was not chaos. It was order of a kind we had never encountered.
a moral gravity that bent the battlefield to its will. Every move, every strike, every sacrifice pulled allies closer, forged cohesion from rubble and fire. From orbit, the sky glowed crimson. Clouds and smoke reflected endless streams of debris. Satellites burned. Fleets that had once been majestic now drifted as shattered skeletons, torn by weapons that seemed to anticipate their every weak point. The Council's ultimate weapon, designed to crush an entire hemisphere, failed not from sabotage, but because humans understood its flaws faster than we ever had. I watched a young human stand atop a ruined ridge, hand resting on the shoulder of an alien veteran, directing reinforcements with nothing but gestures and calm voice.
Entire squads responded, weaving through bombardment with coordination I had never recorded in any species. I realized then that their gravity was more than physical. It was moral. It pulled not just the planet's people, but allies across systems toward a single center of will. Their force was intangible, yet unstoppable. Hours passed as the Red Hour unfolded. Sun and fire mingled with debris and smoke. Ships fell. Cities burned. Heroes died. And yet, the human force persisted, patient, precise, relentless. I saw a single pilot and a broken fighter ram a Council bombardment cannon mid-fire. Explosions scattered across the planet below. He did not panic. He did not scream. He smiled. And in that smile, I glimpsed the truth. Earth had survived worse than stars themselves, and humans were the reason. The final wave of Council ships faltered. Systems overloaded. Engines exploded. Weapons misfired. Entire squadrons drifted inert, scattered like leaves in a storm. Earth's response had been not brute force, but inevitability, and our armada had been measured, assessed, and broken by a species we had underestimated at every step. I returned to the command deck in stunned silence. Around me, veterans whispered curses and prayers. The planet below was scorched, cities fractured, oceans laced with fire. Yet it still breathed, still stood. When the Red Hour ended, the light of the dying sun cast long shadows across a world that had survived the impossible. Our armada, once a river of steel and glass, was scattered, broken, and hollow. And Earth remained, radiant and indomitable, its surface humming with the quiet rhythm of life that would not yield. I understood at last. Humans were not merely strong. They did not merely endure. They gravitated toward survival, pulling every shred of hope, ally, and skill into a force beyond calculation. We had come to crush a planet. Instead, we had glimpsed a new kind of law, one written not in weapons or fleets, but in courage, unity, and the relentless, unyielding will to live. Earth still stood, and I, for the first time, felt the full weight of our failure beneath its sky. The war ended not with trumpets, not with cheers, not with the high cries of victory. It ended with silence, a silence that hummed across the galaxy, thick and heavy, as though the stars themselves were holding their breath. Earth lay scarred, cities smoldered in the ruins of bombardment, yet through the smoke and ash, lights flickered stubbornly, embers refusing to die. Forests burned and oceans shimmered red, yet life endured in every fractured corner. The human warrior who had led their defense, the figure spoken of in trembling tones across star systems, had vanished. Some claimed he died in the last eruption of battle. Others whispered he walked beyond time itself, a ghost of will and courage. I remained behind in the ruins of the Council Spire, the colossal structure that had once symbolized dominion and order. Now it was hollowed by fire and failure, a monument to our hubris and, paradoxically, to our salvation. From these heights, I watched the galaxy shift. Rebellion spread like wildfire. Worlds that had known only oppression now flared with independence. Former slaves built radiant cities on shattered planets, soaring towers of light that rivaled anything we had constructed. Tyrants, those who had enslaved billions, knelt before their victims in public repentance, faces pressed into dust as if learning humility for the first time. Across 1,000 systems, fragments of human ships became objects of reverence, sacred relics,
proof that survival against impossible odds was not a myth. I chronicled all of it, every shattered moon, every reclaimed world, every act of courage. Humanity, a species once assumed fragile and insignificant, had torn apart an empire, not through raw force alone, but through resilience, cunning, and compassion. They had refused to yield when every law of conquest said they should. In the burned archives of Earth, I discovered one final human transmission drifting through the void, encoded not in threat, but in instruction. Stand when you can. Rise when you fall. The message did not echo with anger or vengeance. It vibrated with possibility, a gift offered not to conquerors or allies, but to anyone willing to listen. When I gazed upward from the spire, the constellations no longer seemed distant or cold. They were quieter, kinder, transformed by the memory of a small blue world that had taught the galaxy the true weight of courage. I felt it then. The universe had shifted, not because of fleets or weapons, but because of humans. Their refusal to bow had rewritten the rules, reshaped expectation, and reminded every star and every species that survival was not a product of power alone, but of will, heart, and relentless determination. The embers of their cities burned still, and I knew they always would. The stars listened, and I recorded.